Welcome to Love and Lies Audio, where we present to you the untold tales of love, lies, and life after betrayal. Every heartbreak has a voice, and this is theirs. I never imagined I'd be sitting here, replaying every moment of our marriage like a film I hadn't wanted to watch. Boston was quiet that evening, the kind of chilly spring night that makes you pull your jacket tighter, hear your own heartbeat in the stillness. I had been married to Claire for just over a decade, a life I thought was built on trust, laughter, and shared dreams. Our condo in Back Bay looked like it belonged in a magazine: exposed brick, sunlight spilling across hardwood floors, and every corner meticulously decorated. But none of that mattered anymore. None of it meant anything. It started subtly, the kind of thing you ignore because you want to believe in your own illusions. Claire became distant in ways that didn't make sense. She'd laugh less at my jokes, linger over phone calls, brush off my questions with half smiles that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself she was stressed at work. She had always been ambitious, climbing the corporate ladder, juggling meetings and deadlines with a precision I admired. But ambition had a different scent now, one that smelled like secrets. I noticed the first real warning sign on a Tuesday evening. She had left her phone on the kitchen counter while making tea, which was unusual. She was obsessive about privacy. The screen lit up with notifications from a name I didn't recognize. "Can't wait to see you later." She glanced at it, quickly, too quickly, and slid it into her pocket. I felt my chest tighten. 1,000 little questions formed in my mind, and I swallowed hard. Not yet. Not here. I wouldn't let my suspicions control me, yet. The days that followed were a careful dance. Claire would announce late-night work events with a casual ease, or mention meeting friends for drinks in a tone that suggested spontaneity, but there was a precision in her words that made my skin crawl. Every excuse was rehearsed, measured. I tried asking questions, probing gently, and she would answer with vague smiles or evasive remarks. I began keeping notes, mentally cataloging everything: times, dates, the slightest inconsistencies. Every slip was a breadcrumb. Then came the weekend that changed everything. Claire claimed she was going on a retreat with her colleagues, a wellness weekend meant to recharge before a new project. I nodded, smiled, pretended I was supportive. But that night, curiosity won over patience. I logged onto our shared calendar, traced hotel reservations, and cross-referenced them with her receipts from our joint account. My stomach dropped. The locations didn't match. The hotel was in a part of the city she hadn't mentioned. Dinner charges that were far too expensive for a simple retreat. And the kicker, a name on a confirmation email I recognized instantly. Not a colleague, someone else. I confronted her the following evening, in the living room with Boston's skyline stretching beyond our windows. I tried to remain calm, even-toned, rehearsing words that wouldn't ignite an argument I couldn't control. "Claire, we need to talk," I said. She looked up from her laptop, eyes narrowing slightly, the flicker of guilt, or was it irritation, passing across her features. "I know," she murmured. And then, in that subtle, precise way she had when cornered, she admitted it. There was someone else, someone she had been seeing for months, just months after we had promised forever to each other. The word betrayal didn't even begin to cover it. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't smash anything. I had learned early in life that the loudest explosions of anger rarely brought satisfaction. Instead, I embraced silence. Silence became my ally. As she spoke, detailing fragments of her affair, I began forming my own plan, not of confrontation, but of calculated response. The first step was emotional detachment. I stopped waiting for apologies, stopped expecting remorse. Instead, I observed. Every word she chose, every subtle inflection, became data. I started reorganizing my routines, reclaiming spaces in my life that she had gradually occupied, friends I had neglected, hobbies I had abandoned, ambitions I had set aside. Everything was deliberate, intentional. My revenge wouldn't be loud or dramatic. It would be effective, methodical, and long-lasting. At work, I reconnected with colleagues who had once admired Claire's manipulations, demonstrating a calm confidence I hadn't shown in years. Socially, I restored friendships she had tried to monopolize, strengthening bonds that she had assumed were hers to control. Each new connection, each subtle maneuver, began quietly dismantling the world she had built around herself. At home, I became meticulous. I documented expenses, tracked patterns, noted inconsistencies in her stories. I created small routines that weren't obvious but subtly asserted control. She flaunted her newfound freedom, believing me broken, defeated. I allowed her arrogance to become my ally. Every misstep she made, every casual overreach fed into the network I was building, a network designed to isolate her influence without anyone noticing. Months passed. Claire's control over our shared social circle weakened imperceptibly but irrevocably. Invitations she assumed were hers to command were redirected. Her subtle manipulations were met with calm countermeasures. She began noticing cracks in her strategy, tiny, almost laughable errors she hadn't accounted for. And each day, as I quietly strengthened my position, I realized the profound satisfaction of knowing that patience, not anger, was winning. Spring in Boston has a way of sneaking up on you. One day the streets are slick with rain, the next, the air smells of fresh blooms and sun-baked brick. I used the changing season as a metaphor for my own life. While Claire chased her fantasies, I started to reconstruct mine, quietly, deliberately. My revenge wasn't about public humiliation. That would have been too easy, too fleeting. No, mine would be strategic, invisible, a storm that crept in and rearranged everything she thought she controlled. I began with finances. Claire had always liked the idea that she had sway over our assets, subtle ways to feel superior. I didn't fight her openly. I recalculated, reorganized, and ensured that my access, knowledge, and control were absolute. Every account, every statement, every transaction was under scrutiny. If she wanted chaos, I would give her none. If she wanted freedom, she'd get it, but on my terms. Next came social networks. I reconnected with old friends who Claire had subtly driven away over the years. They were cautious at first, unsure of where my loyalties now lay, but my calm, consistent approach rebuilt bridges she had burned. I noticed the first subtle victory one Thursday night when an invitation she assumed would automatically include her went to me instead. Claire's eyebrows shot up when she realized the omission, but she said nothing. Silence had become her punishment too. The real test, however, was when she started flaunting her affair openly, believing it was untouchable. She invited him, Ryan, a gym trainer with an easy smile and a body she thought irresistible, over for dinner one Friday. I didn't panic. I prepared for it. I bought a new bottle of wine, tidied the condo, and set the table meticulously. I even cooked. Ryan arrived, charming and oblivious to the storm he was walking into. Claire's excitement was palpable, almost theatrical. She smiled at me like she expected outrage. I smiled back, quietly, with calmness she couldn't read. Dinner was polite. Ryan tried to make conversation, and I let him. I asked questions that seemed casual, but revealed a subtle awareness of his intentions. Claire noticed it, the tiny smirk I couldn't suppress when he fumbled over his words, the way I served him wine with deliberate grace. By the end of the night, Ryan left flustered, slightly embarrassed, and Claire's confidence had dimmed just enough to make me smirk quietly to myself. Not a word was said aloud. Not a scene. Just a subtle lesson in boundaries. At work, my life blossomed in ways Claire had never imagined. I started networking with people who admired my calm intellect, my quiet resilience. Invitations I would have once declined, I now accepted, exposing myself to opportunities Claire had ignored in favor of her vanity. A promotion came my way, unexpected but deserved. I didn't boast. I just let the quiet accumulation of my achievements speak louder than any words of anger could. Evenings were reserved for reflection and planning. I began documenting her actions meticulously, times, locations, messages, subtle manipulations, all without confrontation. It was a game of patience. Every lie she told herself, every assumption she made about my vulnerability became a thread in the web I was quietly weaving. By the time Claire realized the balance had shifted, she would find herself standing alone, her illusions dismantled, while I remained untouchable. One evening, Claire tried a new tactic. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "David, maybe we should talk. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow?" Her handwriting, casual yet deliberate, was meant to lure me into a confrontation. I smiled, folded the note neatly, and put it in my drawer. I didn't respond. The silence was my message. She assumed I was angry, devastated, desperate. In reality, I was calculating, anticipating, enjoying the control I had never allowed myself before. Over the next few weeks, she attempted more maneuvers, subtle provocations meant to destabilize me. She would dress provocatively in shared spaces, talk openly about Ryan, even hint at leaving our condo for his place. I maintained calm. I didn't react. Instead, I documented everything, fortified my life, and expanded my own social and professional circles. Each of her attempts to assert dominance backfired quietly, eroding her own confidence without any confrontation from me. The turning point came during a weekend trip she planned with Ryan. She assumed I would be hurt, jealous, maybe even confrontational. Instead, I focused on a personal retreat, a weekend in Cape Cod with an old friend I hadn't seen in years. While Claire thought she was creating chaos, I was living freely, laughing, reconnecting with someone who respected me. The photos she posted online, brimming with supposed joy and freedom, only highlighted the emptiness of her choices. I didn't comment, didn't react. I just let them hang, silent but potent. By now, my life had become a quiet fortress. Socially, financially, emotionally, I was untouchable. Claire's arrogance had blinded her to my capabilities. She believed that the world was hers to manipulate, that I would crumble under betrayal. Instead, I thrived in the shadows of her assumptions. My revenge wasn't violent or dramatic. It was strategic, psychological, and almost imperceptible. Every moment she spent celebrating what she thought was her victory only cemented her eventual realization. She had underestimated me. Spring in Boston stretched into early summer, and the city was alive with tourists and students flooding the streets. I could hear the hum of the city outside my condo, but inside, my world had narrowed to deliberate steps, quiet observations, and calculated patience. Claire's absence from my personal world was noticeable, but not painful. I had built something far more powerful than mere revenge: freedom. Claire, of course, didn't see it that way. She had expected tears, arguments, public confrontation, anything to validate her sense of power. Instead, I offered calm. I offered patience. I offered silence. And in that silence, I built a life she couldn't touch. Every day, I refined my schedule. Morning runs along the Charles River replaced our shared breakfast rituals. I met with colleagues and clients I'd long ignored, attending networking events she would have scoffed at. I documented everything she did, every misstep, every lie, every little display of entitlement. My notes were discreet, precise, a map of her arrogance. One night, Claire assumed she could provoke me. She showed up at the condo with Ryan in tow, both laughing loudly in the hallway, fully expecting me to be blindsided. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, reviewing documents for a new investment project. I looked up casually, raised an eyebrow, and offered a polite, "Evening, guys." That was all. No shock, no outburst. Ryan hesitated, suddenly aware that the man before him was not the defeated husband he had assumed. Claire's grin faltered. She tried subtle manipulations, changing her perfume to a scent she knew I associated with intimacy, leaving notes on the counter, dropping hints about private dinners she claimed were just friendly. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. My calm presence, the unshakable rhythm of my life, became its own silent retaliation. Her frustration mounted with every ignored provocation. Financially, I ensured she had no leverage. Every account, every asset, every transaction was now under my careful oversight. I even secured a few investments she didn't know about, quietly building independence she assumed she controlled. Her sense of entitlement, her smug confidence, was the very thing fueling my subtle revenge. One evening, while Claire was out at a CrossFit event, I met with Emily, a talented designer I had recently collaborated with. Our meeting was professional, yet there was an unspoken connection. She was sharp, witty, and confident. There was no romance, not yet, but the potential for something real existed. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, untethered from Claire's demands, free to explore connection without manipulation. By mid-June, Claire's plans began to crumble quietly. Invitations she assumed were hers were redirected. Mutual friends, once swayed by her charm, now reached out to me for advice and company. The illusion of her control was slipping. I didn't need to humiliate her publicly. The quiet unraveling was far more satisfying. She noticed, of course. Her eyes would linger just a little too long at events we attended separately, a fleeting moment of doubt flashing across her face before she masked it with a forced smile. The first real turning point came on a Thursday evening. Claire texted me, "We need to talk. It's urgent." I read it, smiled quietly, and didn't reply immediately. She was expecting me to react emotionally, to beg, argue, or plead. Instead, I continued reading a financial report, calmly sipping my wine. When I finally texted back, it was just one line: "I'm free Saturday. Otherwise, life goes on." Saturday came, and Claire arrived, attempting to assert control through theatrics. Perfume, a revealing outfit, and that familiar confident tone. She tried to manipulate the conversation toward guilt and regret. I listened, nodded, but offered no emotional ammunition. Every word she tried to weaponize bounced off the shield I had built around myself. I spoke calmly, methodically, reminding her of the boundaries she herself had set, the agreements we had established, the choices she had made. By the time she left, frustrated and defeated, I realized the quiet power of patience. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't raged, I had simply lived, thrived, and let her actions reveal the limits of her control. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Revenge doesn't need noise. It needs strategy, patience, and an unshakable calm. Let them unravel themselves." The months that followed were a careful dance of observation and subtle maneuvering. Claire tried increasingly desperate measures, arranging surprise visits, posting photos meant to provoke, insinuating new relationships. But I was always 2 steps ahead. My social, financial, and emotional lives had become separate ecosystems she could not penetrate. Each of her attempts to regain dominance was quietly countered. One particular evening stands out. Claire invited Ryan over again, fully expecting me to be destabilized by the audacity. I greeted them warmly, offered wine, and asked casual, seemingly innocent questions that subtly exposed Ryan's lack of preparation and confidence. By the time they left, Ryan was embarrassed. Claire was simmering silently, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of a lesson delivered without confrontation. It was during these months that I realized something profound. The best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reconstruction. About building a life so complete, so resilient, and so independent that the betrayer has nothing left to manipulate. Claire's arrogance, her attempts to assert control, only highlighted the strength of the life I had quietly built around myself. By late summer, Boston had that warm, golden haze that made the city feel almost cinematic. I walked the streets intentionally, observing the familiar corners I had once shared with Claire. Coffee shops, the park bench near the river, the tiny Italian bakery we frequented. Those places no longer belonged to her influence. They belonged to me. Every morning run, every lunch meeting, every evening I spent planning or learning something new became a quiet declaration. My life was no longer hers to dictate. Claire tried to infiltrate it anyway. She invited herself to neighborhood gatherings, always smiling, always trying to insert herself into conversations where she wasn't wanted. I maintained a polite distance, letting others, friends, neighbors, colleagues, gravitate toward me naturally. I watched her confidence slowly erode as she realized that charm alone could not command the life I had rebuilt. One evening, I met Alex, a fellow entrepreneur, for dinner at a quiet restaurant in Back Bay. There was a spark, intellectual, witty, and understated, but nothing rushed. I shared my ambitions, my strategies, my frustrations, and she listened, truly listened. That night, I realized something crucial. I could engage with someone new, someone respectful, without the chaos and manipulation Claire had brought into my life. Meanwhile, Claire's desperation began to show in subtle ways. Texts left unanswered, invitations declined politely yet firmly, whispered comments from mutual friends about her mood swings. Every slight felt like validation. I didn't gloat, I merely observed. Patience was part of my revenge. Each small, unnoticed victory added up, eroding her sense of superiority. Then came a pivotal week. Claire attempted what she thought would be a power move. She invited a group of mutual friends to a summer rooftop party, expecting me to attend and feel a pang of jealousy. Instead, I hosted my own smaller dinner that evening with colleagues and a few new friends. Claire's party went on, but she noticed the absence of several key people who had quietly chosen to spend time with me instead. Her smile faltered in the reflections of rooftop lights, subtle yet telling. It was during this time that I began documenting moments of ironic justice. The tiny betrayals she inflicted upon herself by underestimating me, the awkwardness of her attempts to regain influence, the diminishing enthusiasm of her allies, each became a record, a quiet testament to the strategy I had implemented without raising my voice or compromising my composure. The subtle sexual intrigue arrived naturally. Emily, the designer I had met months prior, began to visit occasionally, always professionally at first. Yet the moments of eye contact, the lingering conversations about ambition and desire, created an unspoken tension. I never needed to force it. It existed organically, a gentle reminder that life could offer connection and intimacy on my terms. Claire, of course, sensed it and tried to provoke a reaction. But I remained unmoved, calm, collected, a rock she could not erode. Then came a moment that sealed my quiet triumph. Claire, in an attempt to provoke envy, mentioned a new potential romantic interest she had met. I listened, nodding politely, asking a few neutral questions, and that was it. Later that week, mutual friends revealed that the person she had bragged about had actually dismissed her, uninterested in the games she was playing. The realization hit her quietly, but she couldn't voice it. The true satisfaction of revenge, I realized, wasn't in confrontation or humiliation. It was in building a life so rich, so independent, and so thoughtfully constructed that the betrayer's power became irrelevant. I had financial independence, genuine connections, and a sense of self that no one could manipulate. Claire's anger and frustration were merely echoes of the control she had once assumed she had. Thanks for listening all the way through. If you've ever faced loyalty, heartbreak, or the strength to rise above it all, we want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Love and Lies Audio, because every ending, quiet or loud, tells a story worth remembering.